Hi, my name is Judy Sema. I live in West Bloomfield, and I'm really happy to be here to tell you one of my favorite stories. Holidays were always memorable at my house, but the one holiday I'll never forget was the Thanksgiving of 1956. Eisenhower was president, Yul Brynner won the Academy Award for The King and I, Elvis Presley sang "You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog" on the Ed Sullivan Show, and the words "Under God" were added to the Pledge of Allegiance. I was 12 years old and in the 7th grade at McDowell Elementary School in Northwest Detroit. All summer long, we kids had dug a huge hole in the vacant lot across the street. It became our castle and our fort. We played cops and robbers and hide and seek and cowboys and Indians. But now that I was 12, I was too big for that sort of stuff. Besides, my parents said that I could wear my new Bonnie Bell cotton candy pink lipstick to our Thanksgiving dinner. My parents loved Thanksgiving. It reminded them of their 3 favorite things: America, food, and birthdays. My parents came to America in 1941 to escape the Holocaust, and they were grateful to America for giving them refuge. They voted at every election, and every holiday they hung the flag. On the 4th of July, we would go down to the riverfront for the Freedom Festival, and we would watch the fireworks over the Detroit River between Detroit and Canada. On Thanksgiving, my father would dress my sister and I in our warmest clothes, and we would go down to downtown Detroit and stand on Woodward Avenue for hours watching the Hudson Thanksgiving Parade go by. We'd stand there for hours as the floats went by with Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck, Ming the Merciless and Flash Gordon, the high school marching bands, Hopalong Cassidy. And then, at the end of the parade, we held our breath like everyone else as Santa Claus came floating down the street, drawn in a sleigh by 8 reindeers with a huge bag of toys behind him. And even though we were Jewish and Santa Claus didn't visit our house, we cheered like everyone else. My mother stayed home and she made a big Thanksgiving dinner. And she liked to make a big production of serving it. First would be the red, white, and green Jell-O mold, and then would be her famous bread stuffing and a sweet potato casserole. And when all of us were starving and our mouths were drooling, she would bring the turkey out in a big white platter rimmed in gold and set it down in front of my father. My father would take 2 big silver knives and sharpen them against each other, and then he would carve the turkey and put it on a separate platter. There were drumsticks for the men, wings for the 2 oldest children. My mother got the neck, and the rest of us fought over the dark meat. There was so much food that invariably my mother would forget to serve something. It became an annual joke, and sometimes we even took bets, double or nothing. This year it will be the Jell-O mold. My mother just laughed and said one of her favorite Hebrew sayings, "Gam ze yavor, this too shall pass." We didn't have any family in Detroit, so we had friends that were like family that came to our Thanksgiving dinner. My favorite guest was Marvin Strasburger. He had dark curly hair and big brown eyes, and he looked a lot like Tony Curtis, who was the Brad Pitt of his day. Whenever it came time to say goodbye to Marvin, my sister and I would chase Marvin around the house so we could tackle him and kiss him goodbye. I couldn't wait to try my new Bonnie Bell cotton candy pink lipstick on Marvin. And my father's birthday was November 26th, which always fell on or around Thanksgiving. And even though my mother was a really good baker, my father liked to go and get his own birthday cake. He would drive down to Livernois in Detroit, Northwest Detroit, which was the avenue of fashion. And there was the Rainier's Bakery, which was the best bakery in town. He would get a chocolate cake with chocolate frosting, or an angel food cake with strawberry frosting. He would have the lady in the bakery put the cake in a thin white cardboard box with a gold label saying Rainier's Bakery on it to close it, and he tied it up with white string and carried it home. And he put the cake in the screened-in porch in our back of our house. It wasn't heated in the winter, so it became an extra refrigerator when we had company. The Thanksgiving that I turned 12, I decided that I was too big to go to the Thanksgiving parade. I told my mother that she could go without me and go with my father, and I would stay home and I would dust and I would vacuum and I would set the table, and I'd even make the sweet potato casserole. Well, my mother, she hardly ever got a chance to go to the parade, so she was very happy to let me stay home and do all that work. Well, when Thanksgiving came early in the morning, my mother got up and to put the turkey in the oven and to make her famous bread stuffing. She went out to the back porch where the turkey was defrosting, carried it into the house, and just at that moment, the doorbell rang. Now, she probably should have put that turkey down on the kitchen table, but I guess she was so surprised that somebody was at the door early Thanksgiving morning that she carried it with her to the door. And it was Mrs. Horwitz from across the street. She had come to borrow a cup of sugar. My mother opened the door and the turkey slipped under her arm and it bounced on the porch and hopped down the stairs. It skated down the walk on this thin layer of ice that had formed the night before. Mrs. Horwitz and my mother started running after the turkey, but it had gotten a really good start. And when it reached the street, it did a crazy figure 8 and it bounced up on the curb on the opposite side of the street. And Mrs. Horwitz and my mother came across the street just in time to see that runaway turkey float down, down, down into the hole that we kids had drawn the summer before. And they watched it sink under 12 or 15 inches of murky, muddy water. My mother looked at Mrs. Horwitz. Mrs. Horwitz looked at my mother. Mrs. Horwitz felt terrible, but not as bad as my mother felt. I mean, where were you going to get a new turkey on Thanksgiving morning? But my mother said, you know, I'm always forgetting to serve something on Thanksgiving dinner. This year, it'll be the turkey. Well, my mother and Mrs. Horwitz went back at the house, and my mother gave her a cup of sugar, and my mother called us down for breakfast. And after breakfast, she and my father and my sister bundled up in their warm clothes and went off to the Thanksgiving parade. I went upstairs to try on different outfits and to practice putting on lipstick and fuss around with my hair. And then I went downstairs and I vacuumed and I dusted and I set the table for 12. And then I went into the kitchen. I peeled 5 pounds of sweet potatoes and I put them in a pot to boil. Now, it takes about a half an hour or so for the potatoes to get soft, so I called my best friend Marion. We always had lots of things to talk about. Usually it was about boys. I had to tell her that Marvin was coming to our Thanksgiving dinner, and she said, isn't he the one that looks like Tony Curtis, who was the Brad Pitt of his day? And after a while, the sweet potatoes were cooked, and I said goodbye to Marion. I hung up, and I took the potatoes off of the stove. And I was so tired from all the work I had done that morning, I decided that rather than mashing the sweet potatoes with a fork, I would put them in my mother's brand new Aqua Sunbeam Mixmaster. I put the potatoes in the Mixmaster bowl, and then I added some brown sugar, some pineapple, some crushed pineapple, and a stick of butter, and turned the Mixmaster on high. Just at that moment, the phone rang. It was Marion. She wanted to know what color lipstick I was going to wear. All of a sudden, a glop of something warm and wet hit me on the back of the head, and when I turned around to look, another glop of something warm and wet hit me in the forehead. It was the sweet potatoes. I didn't even say goodbye to Marion. I just hung up the phone. I turned off the Mixmaster, but it was too late. There were sweet potatoes all over the kitchen wall, all over the floor, all over me. It took me an hour to clean up, and then there was nothing left to do, no more sweet potatoes to peel. So I thought, well, my mother was always forgetting to serve something. Usually it was the sweet potatoes. And I just put some mini marshmallows in the bottom of the casserole dish and went upstairs to change my clothes and clean up a little bit. And then I could hear my parents' car coming up the driveway. And I went downstairs and we had a light lunch. And then my sister shooed us all out of the kitchen. She was going to make the salad. I went upstairs to call Marion to tell her what had happened to the sweet potatoes. And at 6 o'clock on the dot, our company arrived. We didn't do hors d'oeuvres or appetizers. Everybody was really hungry. We all just sat down at the dining room table and waited for the parade of food to begin. First, my mother brought out the red, white, and green Jell-O mold, and then she brought out the salad bowl, the wooden salad bowl. It was covered with a dish towel. And when she took the towel off of the bowl, it was empty. And we looked at my sister, and my sister said, well, you know Mr. Angelotti, my fourth grade science teacher, the one who looks a lot like Tony Curtis, who was the Brad Pitt of his day? Well, he has a rabbit, and I didn't want the rabbit to go hungry over the weekend. So I brought the salad to school yesterday. Well, my sister said, but that's okay. I'll get the sweet potato casserole. And before I could stop her, she ran out of the dining room and into the kitchen and came back with the sweet potato casserole dish. She opened the lid, and all we saw were mini marshmallows. And then I had to explain about Marion and the phone call and the mix master. I said, but I'll get the turkey. That's the most important part of the meal. And so before my mother could stop me, I got up and I went to the kitchen. I could hear Marvin's stomach rumbling and grumbling a little bit, and I licked my cotton candy pink lipstick, pushed open the door to the kitchen and opened up the oven. No turkey. I looked on the back porch. No turkey. I looked in the broom closet and the refrigerator. No turkey. I put the famous bread stuffing in the middle of the white platter and brought it out to the dining room and put it on the table. And we all looked at my mother, and my mother said, I lost the turkey. She said, but you know, the dessert is the most important part of the dinner. Everybody likes the dessert the best. And so she left the dining room and went into the back porch and brought out the Rainier's box, untied the string, opened up the label, opened up the box, and inside was a day-old rye bread. We all looked at my father, and he said, well, I left work late last night, and when I got to Rainier's, there were no more cakes. There were no more cookies. There weren't even any sweet rolls. I told the woman to put the rye bread in the box. My wife was always forgetting to serve something. She thought I was crazy, but she did as I asked, and we all sat around looking at each other, our stomachs rumbling and grumbling. And my sister said, this is the worst Thanksgiving dinner ever. And my mother said, nonsense. We have plenty of food. We have a rye bread. I have some lunch meat in the refrigerator. We can open up a can of tuna fish. We have the Jell-O mold and the stuffing. And my mother and I went into the kitchen, and we made a big pile of sandwiches. And I opened up 3 cans of Libby fruit cocktail for dessert. And we had plenty of food. And as we sat back, kind of loosening our belts and digesting our food, my mother said, you know, this might not have been the best Thanksgiving dinner ever. But as I always say, Gumse vivor, this too shall pass. We have the most important things. We have our family, we have our health, and now we even have a story to tell.